Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to USEC's August World Agricultural Supply and Demand webinar. It's great to have you with us. I look forward to seeing many of you at Soy Connect next week, but we have a lot to talk about tonight in advance of that meeting, so it's great to have you with us. Many of you know me, but in case you don't, my name's Jim Sutter. I'm the CEO of the U.S. Soybean Export Council, and I've had the opportunity to interact with many of you. Welcome to this webinar on behalf of our whole U.S. soy industry. Everybody is very excited to be able to provide this sort of information to you. So, as we know, on Friday, the USDA released its latest WASDE report, taking into account survey-based farm yield data. That was the big new input this week. And despite delayed planting, due to rains and wet weather conditions, farmers and USDA's analysts project robust soybean yields, and that will allow us to have good supplies available for the people all around the world. Sustainably produced, high quality, reliable delivery U.S. soy. We're excited to talk more about that tonight. In just a moment, Mac Marshall will get into the latest numbers and provide some analysis. And while these numbers indeed present a positive signal for international buyers, I encourage you to look carefully and think carefully about what it is that your consumers need and want. There are still plenty of things going on in the world that could interrupt the supply and demand picture and your ability. So let's don't get too excited about this. Let's make sure we're continuing to be planning to make sure we're able to supply the world's needs. Russia's war on Ukraine, continuing to come out of COVID, consumer inflation in many places around the world, and some supply chain disruptions continue. So while things are improving, I think we still have plenty of things to work on. And in this time of volatility, we are focused on the positive impact that we can have. U.S. soy farmers are focused on the production of nutritious and sustainable U.S. soy so that families around the world have plenty of food to eat. And regardless of where you are in the food and feed value chain, I encourage you to be watching this carefully and considering sustainability in your marketing campaign and as you make your purchasing decisions. It's becoming something that people are talking about all around the world. I also want to remind you of a statistic. I like this one. Since 1980, U.S. soy farmers improved their greenhouse gas emissions by 43% while increasing soy production by 130%. Now, those are important statistics. And I know it's hard to picture what exactly that means, but people are talking more and more about this. So I believe these positive impacts of U.S. soy give customers and consumers confidence that a better world is possible, and USEC and U.S. soy are committed to delivering this sustainable and reliable soy and all the solutions it can provide. So now for today's program. Mac Marshall, who serves as the Vice President of Market Intelligence for USEC and USB, is going to share some highlights from the report, as I mentioned. Then Mac is going to be joined on the screen by the President and Founder of Global Ag Protein, Miss Emily French, for a discussion on what these numbers mean for the global soy complex and future expectations and things much broader than that. I'm always happy when we have Emily with us, and I know people really enjoy hearing her insights and thoughts. And then before we move to the Q&A portion of the webinar, we'll hear from our Regional Director of EU and MENA, Mr. Brent Babb, who's going to give us an update on what's going on in that part of the world. So remember, please, throughout the program, if you have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat box, and we'll try and get it answered during the Q&A session. And again, thank you for taking time to be with us. It really means a lot that you're doing this, and we're very happy to be able to present this information and this analysis to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mac, who's going to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. And let's go ahead and get right into the meat from today's report. So August, of course, is always an exciting month for this report, since it's typically the first point of the season in which we see updates to yields based off of surveyed crop development. Now, for this report, we were also looking for updates on planted area, as at the end of June, USDA indicated in its acreage report that it would be resurveying Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota due to wet weather throughout the planting season. Moving to the takeaways from Friday's report. With the Surveying of the Dakotas and Minnesota, USDA revised total planted soybean area down by 300,000 acres. The new planted figure is now 88.025 million acres, or about 35.6 million hectares. Despite challenges during planting season, overall crop development has looked strong, and USDA revised its yield projection up by 0.4 of a bushel to 51.9 bushels per acre, which, if achieved, would be a record yield for the U.S. That upward revision to yields more than offset the acreage reduction. The estimated crop size is now 4.53 billion bushels, 123.3 million metric tons, which would surpass last year's record crop. With a robust order book for the 22-23 crop, the new crop, USDA took its new crop export forecast up by 20 million bushels to 2.155 billion bushels, or 58.7 million metric tons. For the current 21/22 marketing year, USDA pulled back its export forecast slightly as the season draws to a close. The 10 million bushel reduction translates into additional carry-in of 10 million bushels to the 22-23 marketing year beginning on September 1st. Factoring in the increased carry-in and higher forecast production and the increased export outlook, projected ending stocks for the 22/23 marketing year were taken up by 15 million bushels to 245 million bushels, or about 6.7 million metric tons. Rounding out the notable domestic balance sheet changes, soybean prices were revised down by 5 cents a bushel to $14.35 per bushel for the new crop projected forecast. Old crop biofuels used for soybean oil was revised down, generating incremental carryout and higher projected supplies for the newer marketing year. Spanning out, projected global ending stocks were revised up by 1.8 million metric tons to 101.4 million metric tons. The increase to projected ending stocks was primarily driven by an upward revision of 900,000 tons to China's production. A larger U.S. crop, reduced exports from Argentina, and lower use in the European Union also contributed to the increase in projected world inventories. Here's a look at what the market was expecting in Friday's report. There was a wide range of expectations for yields, as shown in the charts on the left. The prevailing yield of 51.9 bushels per acre was toward the upper end of expectations. The size of the crop, at 4.53 billion bushels, was also toward the upper end of pre-release expectations. Let's take a quick look at how expected production breaks down across the major growing regions of the U.S. For the map on the left, which shows plantings by state, as mentioned earlier, USDA resurveyed the Dakotas and Minnesota due to planting delays. The resurvey yielded no change in Minnesota plantings, which were kept at 7.5 million acres, a 200,000 acre reduction in the North Dakota, and a 100,000 acre reduction in South Dakota. Total acreage across these three states was revised from 18.9 million planted acres to 18.6 million planted acres, and the national acreage was taken down from 88.3 to 88.0 million acres. Now let's look at yields. In the map on the right, we see that as of Friday, 6 states are projected to have record yields: Arkansas, Mississippi, Virginia, and the larger production states of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Putting it all together, the projected U.S. yield of 51.9 bushels per acre, if achieved, would also be a record. This concludes my brief comments on Friday's report. Let's jump to the meat of the discussion. It is now my esteemed pleasure to welcome Emily French, founder and president of Global Ag Protein, back to the program.
Hey, Matt, great to be here. Thanks for having me again. And hello, world. What a time.
It's always an interesting time. Every August is interesting, but this year, the world of ag, it really, I had a discussion a couple months back with one of our farmers, and he was saying, you know, I feel like we've had 3 black swans just in the last couple of years, and we realized we're thinking about 3 sets of black swans. So, you know, this might be the flock of swans here. I think I've mentioned before.
Climate change. Climate change.
You know, you put it all together.
Climate change.
You put it all together. Naturally, we had the updates, U.S. production here, a much better idea of the crop. But let's zoom back out. What are some of the things that really jumped out to you from Friday's report, in addition to, you know, the changes that we've had on the supply side of the U.S. balance sheet?
What I thought was interesting was, so I'm not an agronomist, first one to raise my hand. Grew up on a farm, yes, but not an agronomist. The yield did not surprise me. I think it surprised a lot of people. The 51.9, that's the same as 2016. let's go back and let's remember for the last 2 years, USDA has understated the US soy crop. So we had that big revision last September, and we will likely have another revision in September of 2022. So I was not necessarily, I thought it was fine. We're going to be smarter in 2 or 3 weeks when we're actually in the fields. But again, it didn't hurt my feelings. I thought, when you look at USDA and what they're projecting, what they discuss, clearly recessionary concerns very much alive, clearly inflation kind of dancing in the background a little bit, but I think recession is definitely the word now, that macro risk versus the inflationary theme that we've been in love with, or the market has been in love with for the last 12 months. That seems to be transitioning. The market's in transition. We're moving from 21-22 to 22-23. What I find peculiar, I guess, is when I look at USDA corn feed demand projections and feed wheat demand projections, and this is without China, USDA actually forecasts a contraction for both of those segments. However, it is almost religiously attached to this idea of protein meal demand expanding. Rest of the world, 3.8 million tons, and then China, a massive recovery dialed in versus this current year. And I think this current year, we do need to step back and appreciate or even understand where China is. And that is the decline in crush of 6 million tons year on year is greater than the trade war and the African swine fever. That 6 million ton decline superseded the 5 million ton in that 1920 period. That to me is interesting.
I'm sorry. Wait, can we break that down again? That was really intriguing. Yeah.
China bothers me. China. I am a China concerned China demand person. Whether it is soybeans, corn, wheat, sorghum, barley, or even rice. When you look at some of these projections. So again, the crush for this year for 2122 versus 2021. So the 12 months ending the 31st of August, it is forecast to decline 6 million tons. That is 1 million tons larger than African swine fever plus a US-China trade war. So I think we have to appreciate and acknowledge that China's crush marketing year to date is down just over 8%. USDA is using 6.4% decline. Yes, there's 24 days left, but China does have some problems. It's at sub 50% of capacity. And so if you're replacing crush every week, that 1.7 million tons, which is about what they've been doing for the past 2 or 3 months in a negative hedged crush environment, they should be buying 24 to 26 vessels per week. That's not what's happening. So they have a much bigger new crop US export book this year, which is about 4.1 million tons larger now. That is the entire gain for the US new crop book now. So China does make me pause, because if we don't see the recovery in China, and again, hedged crush margins through the end of CY22, so December 31st, are still hedge negative. So if we don't see a recovery there, I do get a bit concerned about all those emerging economies, and I think I've talked about this before, that it kind of have ridden the tailwinds or the tailcoats of China over the past decade. So I think there's a little bit of vulnerability there that I think is so important to address. The other thing in moving away from China, and just again, let's be aware that that USDA, the big demand increase for protein meal from 2122 to 2223 versus contraction in corn and wheat. So those 2 or 3 things really don't add up for me. So I'm really paying attention closely there. And then I do think, especially for US farmers or Brazilian farmers or really world farmers, let's be aware that if it's the US balance sheet that is highly influential to CME futures, I think we can agree that it is important. For 2223, At 245, the farm gate price is 14.35 cents per bushel. 2 years ago in 2021, ending stocks were at 257. So only 12 million bushels larger, but the farm gate price was 1080. And I think in this environment, there are two things that are so important. Where are we at in this commodity cycle? And what is the market structure? Those two things I think become very, very important when, again, we're kind of transitioning from this supply concern, supply shock, inflationary thematics to maybe we need to be looking closer on the demand side, holistically and really globally for all the egg complex in general. So those are that's probably what I would offer. And then just when you look at the world supply cushion for soybeans, it's the largest by far. It's the largest at 98 days for 2223 versus 90 days on the 31st of August of this year. So 98 days, that compares corn's about 42, 43, and wheat is about 70 days, give or take. So, but that's all predicated on, does the US finish out well? And then what happens in Brazil?
Yeah, the big question, because if we rewind to this time last year, the expectations were for that very large crop to come out of South America. We're, of course, already hearing whispers about, potentially a third consecutive year of La Nina. Obviously, planting hasn't started down there, but that's something that the world will be watching for and really underscores the criticality of this U.S. crop shaping up well. Like you said, we'll be a lot smarter in a couple weeks in September, but certainly seeing this first indicator of yields, that are taking into account crop conditions and everything is, an exciting move forward. As you're talking about protein meal demand and really kind of thinking about it holistically across the feed grains as well, if I rewind, to last year when we really started to see soybean prices heat up, and of course there was a lot of margin compression in China on crush. Crush margins had been negative for much of the year. A lot of that, going to what's been going on in the pork and further downstream sectors. But there was also some talk at the time about integrating more feed grade wheat into rations, maybe at the expense of soy meal, which had been getting kind of priced out. Now this year, obviously commodity prices across for all of the major grains and oilseeds have been substantially elevated for a litany of reasons. Certainly Black Sea plays a large role in that. Sure. But help me maybe deconstruct that wheat soy protein complex here, because as you said, it's a little bit disconnected with what you're seeing in the balance sheets for corn and wheat versus soy meal.
Yeah, I mean, again, I wish I had a very clear-cut answer. I don't. It gets my attention every time I go through these numbers, is there's just a bit of a disconnect. Now, when we talk about corn and wheat, literally the two things that I think are most important is Europe, right? Whether it's wheat or corn, Europe is the most important aspect to me going forward. They are the world's largest feed wheat sector. They're the world's largest soy meal importer. They're the second largest soybean importer. Their corn crop has been decimated in the last 30 to 45 days. So Europe becomes very, very interesting and compelling for a host of reasons. And the absence of Ukraine and the impact there, obviously, highly influential. I think the one to watch will certainly be China when it comes to protein meal and feed wheat, because it was in China where we saw that massive only China has this footprint where you could increase feed wheat demand 21 million tons in 12 months. Like, that is bananas when you talk just about that whole atmosphere over there. And so what I do think is interesting, though, is we just have not seen the return or the resurgence of soy meal into those feed blends. And that's what makes me pause, is because we haven't seen really a catch up, even though we are seeing feed wheat being reduced in those feed blends. So again, just kind of taking it month by month, but certainly it catches your attention.
Let me pull on that thread a little bit more, because it certainly does. It is attention grabbing. When you're saying China could potentially scale up its feed wheat utilization by, you said 21 million tons in a year.
They did that.
They did that, right? But
Yeah.
but there's a capacity to do that. So,
Which
we're
is
also
crazy.
hearing,
And they had,
even-
and sorry, real quick, they have 365 days of wheat supply. They have a
Yeah, stored
1 year wheat supply cushion. So wheat supply is not an issue.
No,
Okay.
well, that I think feeds into the question that I was going to ask, which is, yes, there's the domestic inventories there, which are probably the first order of business to get drawn down and utilized as rations are reformulated. But of course, we're also hearing that even as the deals for brokering vessels out of the Black Sea have started to come to fruition, make it safe harbor, there's still a lot of grain that's captive in Ukraine. I think 22 million tons, something like that, when you're typically carrying 4 to 5 from one year to the next.
A lot.
Yeah.
Not insignificant. How about this? Not insignificant.
Not insignificant amount. Yeah, no, it's a good way to tabulate it, because sometimes getting those actual numerical estimates will be a little bit more challenging. But I bring that up, I'm just trying to match together some of this, where the excess supply is at the moment, but that will eventually make it onto the marketplace. And is that Chinese growth there in the feed grade wheat sector? Is that a potential offtake opportunity? Okay.
I don't think so. Most of the wheat that China brings in is milling quality. So let's just move past that. But I think when you just look at China as a whole, you're forecast to have declines of corn imports, of sorghum imports, of barley imports. Wheat imports will decline 70,000 tons, so kind of negligible. But I do think going back, my concern with China is that its meal demand for this current year, 2122, is forecast to decline 4.3 million tons. That too exceeded peak African swine fever and the US-China trade war. And right now, USDA has China meal demand to increase almost 6 million tons. So we're going to go from the biggest decline to one of the biggest gains of 6 million tons. And I think we just do need to be super, super sensitive to that. Because if you don't increase meal demand by 6 million tons, you're not going to increase imports of soybeans by 8 million tons. It doesn't pencil, especially when China on the 31st of August of this year, 105 days of a supply cushion, largest on record. They're going into September 1 with the largest soy supply cushion that they've ever had.
We certainly, have a considerable concern about food security, and our farmers play a role in feeding the world. So when there is that availability, it's certainly something that our industry takes pride in making sure that we've been able to supply that. Of course, you have to hedge through price volatility and think about as the market moves back and forth. Really, as always, appreciate your commentary, thoughts. I know I'm walking away with my head both spinning a little bit, but also a little richer too. So thank you so much for joining.
Oh, likewise. Thanks for having me. And I'm super stoked to see everybody in San Diego. It's going to be awesome. So safe travels, and we'll see you in like a week.
Looking forward to it.
Cool.
Jim, back to you
Great.
for your closing thoughts.
A big thanks to Emily, Brent, and Mac for sharing your expertise, your wisdom with us tonight, and doing it on a Sunday night. So you had to work over the weekend and kind of digest all these things. So thank you so much for doing that. All eyes are on weather and growing conditions. And we need to keep in mind that the U.S. crop is still growing. We're excited. We think that there's a very positive momentum going. I agree with the comments that were made. I think our farmers have taken exceptional care of the crop this year and want to be maximizing, because the world needs it. You can see that in the price. But watch it carefully. I think we got a good thing going, but let's see how it turns out. Otherwise, I think it's important that you continue to, and we've talked about this before on this in this webinar, locking in your logistics, using good price risk management tools. There's lots of volatility. There's going to be lots of soy demand. So please make sure you get that taken care of. One of the other things that struck me tonight is just at this time, we are going through just really extraordinary things in both the supply side, because the world is dependent upon the US and then South America. So we'll all need to be watching that very carefully. And then the demand side. We talked about several different countries. Some are declining a little, some are growing a little. How is all that going to shake out? So I think we all have to be good students and follow that very carefully. And finally, I just want to leave you with a thought that our US soy farmers, They take great care and pride in stewarding the land and its resources so we can supply the customers of the world. USEC's here for you. We have a team of people, a great team of people around the world, and we want to make sure that we're there to answer questions, to provide inputs, to provide information, and to connect you with our great exporters or others in the U.S. soy industry. So if you need help with something, please get in contact with your USEC contact in country, or if that's not working for you, go to the USEC website, usec.org, and contact us through that. So let me just say thank you so much for taking your time today, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you for being with us. We hope that this has been helpful to you. We hope that the insight and the information that was shared by the experts that were here provides benefit for you. So stay safe. I look forward to seeing some of you in a relatively short period of time, and I look forward to connecting with all of you in the future. Thank you for your business with US Soy. We are here to serve you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.